And we're going on both groups, right?
We are on all three: Foundation, Warrior Path, and Foundation YouTube. Kamau, how are you this morning, sir?
I am doing mighty well. And I would like to say, for those in the Warrior Path group, I've had a buddy check, and I've seen some other messages written about what appears to be concerns about my demise, disappearance, abduction, or otherwise erasing from the organization. And I just want everyone to know that, first of all, that I love you and I love this community more than anything I could ever imagine. And when I received from somebody whose initials were KZ, it filled my heart with an amazing amount of joy, as the two of us are civilians, to have people, and I don't know that I've ever met this person, actually reach out and just be like, hey, I just wanted to see, I haven't seen much happening, what's going on? Blew my mind. I know Matt Schobert wrote recently, where am I? And I just want to say I'm good. I'm not a hostage. This is not a personal life session. And really been working hard on a couple of things, and Schobert in particular. One of the things we've been working really hard on is the Avalon stuff, which we'll talk about. And then the other is this first responder effort, this effort to try to get concepts and ideas into cultures. And so my availability to do any kind of Facebook Lives and other things has been very limited. And so in that spirit, I just want to say I'm well and alive, and I've had the first vaccine and traveling a lot. So yes, so that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I did want to address I don't think it's an elephant in the room, but anyway.
He still is here. And it's good to have you here. And busy, I would say, is quite an understatement for you, sir. Unless you do Facebook Lives on airplanes, I don't think it's possible.
No.
So, but let's catch everybody up. It's been a busy, what are we? April, 4 months, or 3 and some change. We got lots of stuff going on. We got Warrior Path in now 8 locations. Virginia, Arizona, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Maine, the mobile training team hopping around, and now our 8th partner in Northwest Arkansas. So we've been busy with that, but you've been busy on a whole nother level with other endeavors related to all the things that we do. So where do you want to start? You want to start with the Gary Sinise Foundation Avalon Network? You want to start with the first responder stuff? What do you want to get into?
Yeah, let's start with the Gary Sinise work. And I was looking at the calendar. So my birthday is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. It's a great birthday. And it's a little under a month away. And my birthday also fell when we did the first planning workshop for Warrior Path in 2014. And so next month will have been, I guess, the birthday of Warrior Path, if you would consider that, will be the 7th birthday of Warrior Path. And as you said, we are now, and you and I were in Arkansas last month, at the 8th location, which is pretty good, right? So more than a location per year that we've seen this thing happen. And, what's up, Al? When we started this journey in May of 2014, what was clear to us was a few things. One is that the traditional approach to mental health, which generally relies around talk therapy and then sort of short duration treatments like a prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, for a lot of people was proving to be either inaccessible, that people were not interested in that for lots of reasons, which we can talk about, or they would go and start to do it and then it wouldn't be effective for them. Either they felt worse, they couldn't connect to their therapist, whatever it was. Now, there are plenty of people who go and have benefits. That's awesome too, right? That is awesome too. But what was clear to us is there was a huge issue with a large percentage of people in the communities that we serve, which is combat veterans and first responders, who needed something different. And so we went and explored what different would look like, and encountered Dr. Tedeschi down in your neck of the woods, down in Charlotte. And and started to become students of this thing called post-traumatic growth, and really want to bring that to bear in people's lives, not just so that they could address what they've been through, but that they could actually live a meaningful life no matter what they're going to face, because all of us will continue to face things. And the first Warrior Path was done in June of 2014. It looks nothing like, just as a bit of, it would be like Warrior Path trivia. And I don't have my beads, but like the mala beads that I wear, they must be in my other room. I'm just packing for my trip to Arizona. And so for some reason, I was like really interested in these things. So on the first Warrior Path, there was a mala bead making module thing, which was a complete and utter disaster. I couldn't get string that was thin enough to go through the beads. When I found that, then the things broke and people were upset. It was a disaster. But anyway,
True
just a little bit of
crafts.
levity. Yeah, exactly. True arts and crafts from somebody who really doesn't have a lot of, I'm creative, but I'm not artistic, as you well know.
Fair.
If we could draw, I could show you and prove that. So anyway, so it evolved and changed a lot over the course of, let's say, the first 6 or so months of 2014. And then in early 2015, Dr. Moore, Brett Moore, was an Army psychologist. He was actually at one point the longest deployed Army psychologist in Army history, 27 out of 32 months. And then Dr. Fessy came up to Virginia, and they sort of sat through the program. They're like, there's something really meaningful here. And then started to figure out, like, how do we want to start to, I guess, concretize would be a nice word, what we're doing. And so we started to work on that. You came along in September of 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And we got to a place where we felt really good that the program of Warrior Path was in a stable place, and we wanted to create a curriculum for it. And the idea was that we knew that we wanted to expand it to more places, and that was going to be the key to being able to do that. And we had a lot of meetings with a lot of people, and it was very challenging to help people understand, because, and it's interesting, I'm doing a talk with a Warrior Path alum, Rob, from Massachusetts, who who's also a Patriots fan, for chiefs, for police chiefs in the mid-city range, so 50 to 999 cops. And the whole premise of the talk is that the way we think about mental health is the problem. Not so much what we do, but what we think drives what we do, and that needs to change. And so to get people to think about, like, these people want to do a training program, not a treatment program, like, it didn't compute for a lot of people. And we ran into a guy who had been a special forces guy, or was still in, I think, reserves as special forces, a guy named Marcus Ruzek, who works at the Marcus Foundation, Bernie Marcus's foundation, one of the founders of Home Depot. And he totally understood, because he came from a military perspective and understood training standards and so forth. And Marcus came, I remember he came to a program. I don't know, Greg, you must have been there, right? When he came that day?
Yep.
I feel like you would have been, because I think it was fall of 2015. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And they invested $1 million, which is a lot, for us to be able to do this. And we got to work for 18 months to work on this thing, to study it, to make sure that we had it good. And then we had another donor, the Clark Foundation. And I tell you this because I think the stories are important, right? How we got here is important. And so the Clark family, who had funded one of the cabins in Virginia at $500,000, an amazingly generous family. And then the day before, a few days before the launch of Boulder Crest, Virginia, for those who've been, they put their name on the lodge, which was $1.5 million. And they came back and they said, we love what you do, because, and this is at the core of what this community is about, you guys do what you said you're going to do. And they said, we want to help you do more. What would that look like? And we told them we've always wanted an East and a West Coast place. So we've been eyeing this property in Virginia and Arizona, flirting with these people for a while. And they said, okay, well, how much would that be? And we're like, it's $10 million. And they went out. It's not just like one meeting where people agree, and then they agreed to do it. And again, one of the things I think that this community inspires is what I would call is like anonymous giving. Is for Jews like myself, there's something called tzedakah. Tzedakah is really like charity. And there are different forms that go from like the lowest form, where you're doing something for someone and they know, to the highest form, where you're really preserving the dignity of both the giver and the person receiving. And these folks asked for nothing. They literally asked for nothing. And we asked for permission if we could put a plaque to indicate that they had provided the resources for this place. And they said yes. But it just speaks to the way in which Ken and Julia run their lives, And the way that you all run your lives is you're quiet professionals, right? That ethic is such a profound part of this community. And you inspire other people to do things for good reasons and with respect and dignity. And then you and I got to go and train. We opened, which is amazing because next year it'll be the 5-year anniversary of opening Arizona in November of 2017. We started running programs there in March of 2018. And we were able to demonstrate that this program, you know, of course, like it's any military or first responder, be like, of course, you proved that you could train the trainer, like no fooling, right? Like shocking. But we had to prove it, and we proved we could do it. And the folks from the Marcus Foundation said, what's next? And Bernie Marcus is a remarkably charitable man. My guess would be Bernie's given away north of $1 billion in his life. If you're in Atlanta, he's done the stroke center. He's done incredible work in autism, incredible work with, I think it's called Autism Speaks, incredible work at the Grady Hospital. And then he went to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta a number of years ago and met a guy who had been written off by traditional kind of hospitals as saying that he had a brain injury they couldn't do anything about. In the Shepherd Center, in a relatively short period of time, this guy's life was transformed. His capabilities and his functions were transformed. And Bernie was like, this is amazing. And he started to learn more about brain injury and about the military. And amazingly, and if you read, and I was telling you, Greg, that you should read the book Built from Scratch that's basically Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank's story of creating Home Depot, is Bernie wanted to be a psychiatrist. But because there were quotas for Jews to go to Harvard Medical School, they wanted a bribe that Bernie did not have. He didn't have $10,000 between, he said, every member of his entire extended family to do that. And so he went to pharmacy school. It's just an interesting story. And so Bernie funded Jim Kelly, and Jim Kelly was the guy who helped start the NICO, the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, up at Walter Reed, which still exists and serves active duty. It's interdisciplinary, so like 15 different doctors all meet with you, and it's called a fishbowl, where you don't have to tell your story 15 times, you tell your story once. And Jim wanted to create a version of that for veterans, and Bernie funded him to do that at a significant amount of money. And so you had Bernie funded that, and Bernie funded Boulder Crest to do this Warrior Path stuff. And what Bernie will tell you is he didn't build a hardware store. They built the Home Depot. There's 1,500 or so Home Depots around the world. They do big things, right? So he didn't just want to fund a program. He wanted to fund something that could underpin a broader expansion. And so Jim and Ken, our chairman, got together and they went and talked to the Marcus folks. And they said, here's our idea. What we'd like to do is to have 10 sites around the country doing Warrior Path, and 10 sites around the country that are doing really advanced traumatic brain injury work and some psychological health work for veterans around the country. And we want to inspire and show people what is possible. And one of my favorite quotes, and I'm sure if people have seen any of the My Path videos, they know this, is Schopenhauer: man mistakes the limits of the world for the limits of his own field of vision. We are very easy to put blinders on. And when you show people, and this is a city on the hill, I went to Tufts, which is on a hill, John Winthrop, this idea, this kind of American ideal of show people what's possible, don't just tell them. And that was the idea. And that undertaking was going to be called the Avalon Fund. And Bernie put in the first $20 million. At Bernie's 91st birthday, I think is right, Arthur Blank, who was Bernie's business partner at Handy Dan's, where, by the way, it's part of the story, Bernie and Arthur got fired, like summarily fired from their jobs. Like with I wouldn't say they didn't have a pot to piss in, but they didn't have much. They went and started the Home Depot, and Arthur subsequently ran it when Bernie retired. Arthur announced that he was going to be matching Bernie's donation of $20 million. And as we had discussions about this broader enterprise, which is almost $200 million enterprise, one of the organizations that Bernie Marcus has been involved with some time, as is Home Depot, is the Gary Sinise Foundation. And Gary Sinise, very famously known for being Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, I think his book was like Proud American is one of his books. Is just an amazing, like real deal human being. He's just a wonderful human being. And one of the things that Gary has done is to build homes or modify homes for severely disabled, usually 2 or more limbs lost guys and gals around the country. And he's also done a number of other programs. They have a program called Rise. They do Snowball, which is for Gold Star kids to go to Disney World. Now they're going to expand that, I think, to I don't. They do for Gold Star teens. I don't want it for kids. And so, Home Depot has been a major player in that. Bernie's been a major player in helping to fund some of these homes being built. And so went to Gary and said, hey, this is what we're undertaking. Are you guys interested in partnering? And they said, yes, we are. And Gary Sinise Foundation has, and interestingly enough, while Ken and Gary have known each other for some time, and we did a podcast with Struggle What podcast with Gary and Ken, is that one of the ways we started programmatically with Gary Sinise and DAV was that Gary was talking to a guy named Jim Sursley, and Jim's an amazing, amazing man. I know you've met him, Greg.
Yep.
A triple amputee, a one-armed roofer, down in Florida,
and fisherman.
And Jim's probably late 60s is my guess, right? And I think, and I'm probably screw up his story, but he was injured, I think, very soon into his time in Vietnam from a grenade launch.
First couple days. Yeah.
And Jim, one of the things he said was that he wakes up every day and he thanks God for the Army and he thanks God that he got injured. Mm-hmm. And you talk about post-traumatic growth, just an amazing person. So Jim and Gary are talking in Jim's kitchen about his concern that guys are going to get and gals are going to get these houses and have relationship issues and have struggles, because it's a big responsibility. And it's like, more importantly, what do you do next, right? You may not have to work to feed your family, but you do need to work to feed your soul in some meaningful way. And so they came to us and said, hey, would you guys work on a program? And that's really what started to steepen our programmatic involvement, where Sinise has not only been funding that with DAV, but also funded us to do work with first responders, which they're very actively involved in as well. And so the net of how, the long-winded answer, which is not a surprise for me, the way we got to where we are today is between Gary and Bernie and Arthur and Boulder Crest and MIBH agreed to sort of all partner together. And then for this, what was the Avalon Fund, to be called the Gary Sinise Foundation Avalon Network, which is where we stand today. That was announced on February 15th, that was going to be the undertaking. So there are 5 brain injury centers up and running. There's the Marcus Institute in Denver. There's the Shepherd Center in Atlanta. There's University of Florida, Jefferson University Hospital in Pennsylvania, and Tulane in New Orleans. And then, as you said, there's 8 Warrior Path partners up and running. And then next year we'll probably be at 10 or 11 of the Warrior Path sites, depending on what happens, or 1,500, depending on what happens. And then the brain injury, the same. And the idea is to create a world-class network that not only addresses like the core issues when you look at, particularly on the veteran side, and yes, we do serve, and we're very proud to serve first responders, the idea is when you look at the major causes of veteran suicide, there's 3 things. It's undiagnosed or misdiagnosed brain injury, it's major depression disorder, which probably fits in the guise of like complex PTSD, and there's substance abuse. And often people have 3, some people have 2, some people have 1. But the idea is we're going to show people what's possible. And a critical aspect of that isn't just what we do, but it's how we do it, right? It's the regard and the love and the care for these men and women who we see making comments, who we care and love for all of them. And that's the idea. And so that requires a major fundraising effort. That requires a lot of programmatic work. It requires tireless work on the part of you, sir, coach, and amazing students that we get the chance to meet. And so, and what we've seen is the sort of, if you build it, they will come kind of mentality is like, we had one place and we had a waiting list, and it's like, well, we would have Arizona. Will more people start to be interested in Warrior Path? And now we're at a place where, we need to get 5 or so people to apply every single day to Warrior Path to fill the seats we have. And by the way, this year alone, we will serve as many people as we did in the first 6 years of Warrior Path. In May, so next month, so the 7-year anniversary, we will have served 1,000 people in Warrior Path. And I think the number that I've said, Greg, it's 4. What's the number? The social impact's 500 people, right?
500 people, yeah.
Yeah. So
per veteran.
So that would be what we know from the studies we've done, is that each Warrior Path student positively affects 500 people in their lives, which means at 1,000 people, it's 500,000 people that you guys are affecting with those pebbles in the pond that ripples, the concentric circles. That's the impact that we are all having. All of us are having. And that's an amazing thing. And so that's kind of the journey we've been on. Ken was doing some video work because the Sinise Foundation's 10-year anniversary is is next year. Boulder Crest 5th year anniversary, 2022, 2023 is the 10-year anniversary of Boulder Crest, Virginia. So it's just this amazing thing. And I think, and I mean this wholeheartedly from a student perspective, from the partners we have, is it is amazing. But the most amazing part, I think, is the connections and relationships we build. And there's this kind of thought and idea about that the key to all of this is your willingness to allow your interfaces with other people to change you, right? And that, I think, is what you and I are tributes to, is when we talk about the 500 people you affect, is we're both civilians who've been massively affected by the role of combat veterans and first responders in our lives and this community. And I know for you that affects your home life and all of these people. And that's just an amazing thing.
It is. And to think that, what is it? 6 years ago, we were plugging along, and I still remember sitting in Warrior Path 16. We were running a pilot program in Michigan. And like every night we do the AAR at the end of the day, staff debrief, and say, all right, not from a attaboy, we're not, there's a place and time for patting each other on the back, but every night it was, all right, how'd the day go? Where do we need to make improvements? And I remember distinctly at that program, Ken still being in the day-to-day of it and going, nope,
not there yet.
We're not there yet. And now 6 years later, well, we still have that mindset, still have that mindset of continuous improvement and constantly evolving and learning and growing and shaping and reshaping and having the most impact possible. 6 years later, we're about to serve our 1,000th Warrior Path alumni, and that's just one branch. That's just one piece of the pie for everything that goes on within Boulder Crest and now the Gary Sinise Foundation Avalon Network, which is crazy. It's absolutely wild to think that in such a short amount of time, this thing has exploded in some incredible ways.
Well, and I also remember, I don't know if it was 7 or 8, but sitting with you and us getting to know each other, just how this whole, it is interesting. Sometimes you get a little wistful and look back and stuff, and it's been an incredible journey. And like sometimes people will say, well, where do you think you'll be in 5 years? It's like you laugh. It's like, I'm not a jackass. Like, I remember in 2014 in May when we did this planning effort to create the schedule for Warrior Path, we went kayaking. We paired up, and I was with Ken, and I was like, if we could figure this out, it'd be really cool if like one day we could do this at another place, right? And it was just like this crazy idea. And then 3 years later, almost to the day, we closed on Arizona. And then it's just, so I think, and it's a testament to, I know there's a lot of interesting, crazy things happening in our society, and there's causes where if someone wanted to focus on to be jaded, and at the same time, I think we've gotten the chance to be exposed to both students, instructors, but also members of the community who deeply care. And I know, certainly for first responders, certainly for cops, and you and I were down in Miami last week, is there are a lot of people who in a non-political way, they just care deeply about you and your life. And want you to have great lives. That's the bottom line. There's just a lot of people in this country who are like, yeah, it's unsat that we're asking people we're having people believe that the cost of service to your nation in some form or fashion is the quality of your life. And that can't be the compromise. That can't be the trade-off. It doesn't work. And it's not fair. It's not just. It's not right. And I think there's an understanding of that. And that's the part that I think goes a long way. And like I said, we're partnered with people who are of the just highest integrity, of Arthur Blank, of Bernie Marcus, and Gary Sinise. It's just like, and all the partners we have, but it's just really, really good quality human beings who, if you look in the world and you're like, oh, all this or that, the rest of it, you just look at them and you're just like, there are some amazing human beings.
Yeah. It's all about what's possible, which is also, in a large part, what our Warrior Path and that our alumni community is a part of that philosophy. it's about what's possible, about the new. We talk about new possibilities, and this is one of those things that we get to do, that we get to be a small part of a bigger picture that has the potential to impact the change in narrative in a huge way on not just a piece of life, but life in general for people. And like you said, we're talking 1,000 Warrior Path alumni, and the impact being 500,000 people. And every time we get to have these conversations, every time we get to have a program, every time we get to witness the growth in the people that experience Warrior Path, and the other, like I said, the Warrior Path isn't just the only thing that we got going on, is that number will continue to grow, and that ripple will continue to grow, and the impact will continue to grow, and the possibilities will, in a sense, are endless, that we get to, as human beings, get to have on this world, especially in this day and time, and I think part of it comes down to what we're focusing on, and we're focusing on what can we do to create change, what can we do to provide and be a catalyst of growth and opportunity and hope and strength in a world where people rather piss and moan about air conditioning, or my internet went out, or I was 5 minutes after the bell rang for work, so now you owe me that 5 minutes. And it's nice to be a part of something that's meaningful, that brings meaning to so many lives, which is also kind of what we were doing last week, right? In the first responder initiative that is building as we continue down this road of growth and opportunity.
It is true, Gregory, and I appreciate you joining. One of the things that Ken always talks about, and it's analogous to the fight against improvised explosive devices on the battlefield, is that in order to solve a problem, you have to squeeze it. And on the right side of this is, which may look like my left hand, but in any case, on this side of this is being able to do things that are meaningful for people who are struggling, right? What you might call kind of acute stuff, right? And that's where we talk about Warrior Path or other kinds of mental health stuff that people use, is what to do when you're in a really bad spot. But the question is, what do we do to keep people from getting there? Because one of the challenges of a community where people are disinclined to ask for help, to raise their hand, a lot of times for professional reasons, right? For very, not just stigma reasons, but also professional reasons, is we've got to figure out how to do that, because it's dangerous. You will lose a lot of people to suicide, to despair, to addiction if you can't figure out how to get left. And one of the other things that's true is that, cultures and processes get the outcomes that they're perfectly designed to get. And if 30% plus people in the military, in the first responder world, struggle with significant issues, then there's something in the culture that is problematic. It's not good enough to talk about what to do when people struggle. You have to actually fix aspects of the culture. And we spent a lot of time talking to people within the military. And if I just rewind for 1 second, Ken and I wrote a book called Struggle Well. We published it in May 1st of 2018. And the idea behind us doing that was that we got a lot of civilians, particularly donors and community members, who, when we told them about what we did with veterans and first responders, said, what can you do for us? My mother, father, brother, wife, sister, et cetera, et cetera. And we're like, well, we don't have seats and programs for people who aren't part of our constituents, but we'll think about it. And Ken and I thought about it, and we spent about a year and change writing a book to capture what we've learned in the hopes that it would benefit people who maybe will never have the chance to meet. And naturally, some people read the book, particularly in the military, and said, hey, will you come and speak to my unit in Virginia Beach? Or will you come to Hawaii? Or will you come I went to Lejeune and spoke to 10,000 Marines. They kicked my ass, 10,000 Marines in 5 days, doing 3 talks a day for 3 hours at a time. For a per diem. I was like, this is good quality Marine Corps work right here. And I didn't even have time to eat. I was eating almonds during breaks from the talk to try to sustain myself. And it was a beautiful experience. And so that became a really interesting reminder to us that what we know may be as important as what we do. And that the notion of post-traumatic growth and the journey and the path, or a path, or whatever you want to call it, has resonance with a lot of other people. And so, and by the way, during COVID, we saw that a lot. We saw a lot of people in the business and non sort of military veteran first responder communities who asked for support. So we had an understanding that there was value in the concepts and ideas and helping people think and frame the way that they go through struggle. And so, again, we've been working with the military for some time. And it's hard, right? It's hard work working with the military. It's a big institution. Each of the services is a big institution. And we got introduced not even 2 years ago to a guy named Bernie Gonzalez. And Bernie was the chief of police for Miami-Dade, for training for Miami-Dade. And he ran the training center for 10 years, did work with Central and South America for the State Department, reforming police departments and kind of civil society, rule of law type stuff. And his brother, Mario Gonzalez. And Mario was a firefighter for almost 30 years, was a chaplain and a real leader in the peer support world. And both, and you got to meet them last week, just wonderful.
Larger than life.
Two more wonderful human beings with an amazing story of leaving Cuba. And I don't want to say too much about their story and hijack their story, but leaving Cuba. And one of the things that was true is if you were leaving Cuba and you cry, your children cried, your children would be kept because it meant that your children didn't want to leave the homeland. And you just think about that, right? You think about that challenge of that. And so these two gents we got introduced to and started to talk to them, and they were very, very dedicated to changing the way the institutions of policing and fire operate to better support their people. And we worked for about 18 months on what a game plan would look like. And then in November, we got funding from, say it again, the Gary Sinise Foundation, from the Community Police Relations Foundation, which is a really great group of folks and a great foundation that's based down in Miami, but also does work in New York and other places. And then Boulder Crest matched that. And so we got some initial funding to try to see what was possible, and had a lot of meetings with, in particular, Miami-Dade Police, Miami-Dade Fire and Rescue, and the City of Miami Police. And Clinton, to answer your question, yes, they do fall into the first responders category. The Border Patrol would, to answer your question. So the idea and kind of where we've come to is we want to look at a comprehensive life cycle to approach to the ways in which people understand how to take care of themselves, how to think about struggle, and how to deal with life. And if we step back for a second, right, 3 of the 4 most stressful professions in the world are police, fire, and military. The other, by the way, which is good trivia, is air traffic control. And the fire guys, Mario was presenting this last week, and it's like 1 is enlisted military, 2 is fire, 3 is ATC, and 4 is police, which, people were theorizing why that was the case, but whatever. We don't need to figure that out right now. We didn't make the list.
That's right.
But it's not just stress that people encounter in these ways of life. It's trauma. Let's not beat around the bush, right? Like a police officer experiences, and I don't know how they get this number, 2.9 traumatic incidents every 6 months. Firefighters are consistently responding to really horrific things, especially, on the fire and the rescue side. And the point is those experiences, they change you, they alter you. And the idea that you'll get used to it, right? That you'll get used to seeing dead children, it's not true. Right? You might suppress your emotions and turn them off entirely and not feel them, but you won't get used to it. And the question is, how do you maintain your humanness, which is what you need to be able to connect with the people you care about and the people you serve, by the way, and be engaged in this work. And so for us, part of that is understanding the nature of the work, and part of it is understanding how to think about and navigate your journey through those experiences. And one of the, a key differentiator between the military and the first responder community is, generally speaking, the first responder community tends to be a career field where, obviously in the military, just by percentages, most people aren't doing a full career, right? Most people, like in the Marine Corps, will do 4 years. And what happens usually after 15 years is people get really jaded. And we saw that, right? There's a lot of negativity. You feel trapped. It's like, well, I'll say one bad word is there's a great book by a guy named Gil Martin, and he just talks about, like, after 15 years, everything is bullshit. Everything, the people you serve, the people you work with, the administration, like all of it. And the question is, how do you allow people to go through their life where the life doesn't chart like this? And so for us, what that looks like is full life cycle. And that means what do we do at the police academy or the fire academy? What do we do for police in particular with field training officers, right? Somebody is with a person, a new recruit for 6 to 12 months. What doesn't work is Training Day, the movie. What doesn't work is, hey, everything they taught you at the academy, throw that out. None of it's real. It's not the real world. It's not how the streets work, right? That doesn't work either. Right? What happens every single day at the police academy while they're doing physical training? What are those conversations about? Because generally, unlike the military, there's not the same level of personal fitness tests in the police force as there are on the military side. So that's those two pieces. What does the in-service training look like? One of the things we're doing at Miami-Dade College of Criminal Justice is to do talks, 2-hour talks before every mandatory in-service training. These trainings could be about shooting, could be about driving, could be about domestic violence, whatever it is. For the first 2 hours, we do a talk. We do talks about life behind the badge and the unique stressors and how to deal with them. Talks about emotional intelligence, post-traumatic growth, grief and the first responder, change and transition, because for police and fire, every day is a change and transition. Going in, coming back home, taking the uniform off. How do you do that? How do you think about it? How does retirement work? So the idea is to normalize and socialize these subjects where people can think about them before they might be in the midst of the muck and the mire.
Right.
Leadership training, right, at all levels. I fundamentally believe two things, and I know Ken does too. One is that mental health, or that PTSD and other challenges are leadership issues as much as anything else, and the research is good on that. And the second is that mental health is everyone's job. And if you want to be an effective leader in the 21st century, and COVID's borne this out, is when you ask someone how they're doing and they start to share and you get scared because you don't know what to say, right? That's on you, not on them, right? And the right answer isn't to say you need to go talk to somebody, because they are talking to somebody. They're talking to you, and you need to know how to listen to them. And in addition to that, you have supporting psych services, which some departments have, some don't. And then what happens when people transition out, so that in one of Ian's favorite statements from the mobile training team, that the police, the fire, the military doesn't become the last greatest accomplishment of your life. And you don't spend your retirement years looking back and talking about, war stories, but you actually continue to be meaningfully engaged. And I think if you look at Bernie and Arthur, if you look at Bernie and Mario, if you look at Ken, you look at you, right? People whose lives have lots of different chapters are the most interesting people. And while what happened before helps to inform us and educate us and help us, we don't get stuck, right? Bernie Marcus did indeed, co-found the Home Depot, and Bernie Marcus is a massive philanthropist. That's what he does now, right? Ken was a bomb disposal technician, then he was a successful entrepreneur, right? But as Condoleezza Rice said, and it's in your journal, in the Warrior Path Journal, is I firmly believe that you should never be the former anything. So what are you now? What are you doing now? And so that's the vision of what we're trying to undertake. And a part I didn't mention is part of it for us is the role of the peer, which everyone who went through Warrior Path would have experienced, is essential. Because you look at police culture or fire culture, you don't want to talk to administration. People are somewhat reluctant to talk to psych services because there's a concern often that the same hand that wants to help you also wants to punish you. And that sort of lack of trust, we've seen it with the NFL players. Ironically, right, they created the players' trust as a standalone to try to help, and they just can't get over the issue because it's like, well, how did this guy get a DUI? They have a free driving service. Those guys are worried that if they use the driving service, they get reported back to the general manager and they're going to get cut. And so there's a real lack of trust. So the normal issues that people have when they struggle is feeling like they're alone and isolated and don't have people to lean on and can't talk to people, are very, very real in the midst of these professions. And so for us, it's how do we open up that dialogue? And then, when we talk about the leadership stuff, and like I said, Rob and I are doing a talk on the 27th for the International Association of Chiefs of Police for the mid-cities, is what's the role of leadership in that mix? And we've had police chiefs go through this program because they realize that if they don't lead from the front, nobody's going to follow, right? If they don't model that it's okay to ask for help, then nobody's going to follow. And so that's the real vision, is to pilot this in Miami, to hope it goes well, which so far is so good, and then to continue to go from there to potentially other cities and locations. But ideally, I would say, to be honest, is probably to get Florida right. And that would mean changing training standards, right? So the Florida Department of Law Enforcement sets what mandatory in-service trainings are. And if you could get some of these, what we call life skills training courses, as mandatory training for police officers, the idea is to talk about it. And I'll conclude with one story, and then I'll stop filibustering. So Mario was doing a talk about grief in the first responder. And dealing with death is a part of the life of the people we serve, right? And usually premature death in some ways, shape, or form. And this guy was very cynical about the whole thing and seemed really disengaged and sort of had a scowl on his face. And Mario figured, this guy's going to put on the evaluation that the college makes him do, not good marks. And in it, Mario talked about losing his mom and his dad within, I think, 9 months of each other, his mom having Alzheimer's, his own personal experience. And this guy came up and he said, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." And he left. And a couple weeks later, Mario was back to teach the same course before a different class. And this guy shows up again. And Mario's like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "It's the same class again. What are you doing here?" And the guy goes, "I need to hear it again. I need to hear it again." And the idea is just trying to realize that the reactions we have and responses we have to when we struggle is they're legitimate, they're normal, they're appropriate, and we don't want to get stuck there. But part of why we get stuck is because of the messages and the way we interpret our struggle. And I think that's the whole thing is that's the key. So that's what we've been working our butts off on. And I do smile sometimes, Coach, because people are like, "Oh, you're living that Miami life." I'm like, I don't know about that Miami life, man. I go to sleep in the Hampton Inn in Miramar, Fort Lauderdale. I go to meetings and then I go back to sleep and hit the gym if I have time. So
and sit in traffic in between.
I'm still very, very not tan, which I guess would be an indicator that what I'm saying is true. I still haven't been to the beach. I did have to go to a meeting in Miami Beach once, but that's as close as I got. So I ain't hanging out on I forget what LeBron said in the decision about I'm taking my talents to South Beach. Is that what he said?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not what's happening. But anyway, it's been good.
So my question, there's a lot going on, and at the foundational level on both sides of this equation. I mean, you talked about squeezing the problem, and we're working on both sides of the equation. But there's a common thread and a common foundation that's a part of both of those, and that's capacity and connection, right? We have to have the capacity. You talk about people not, hey, you need to go talk to somebody. And like you said, hello, Norman, yeah. They're talking to you. Like, we have to have the capacity to realize that, we are capable of helping each other. And we're sitting in that room last week, and as part of the training, and peers helping peers, we see the power of people helping each other. But at the same time, that foundational element is your own capacity. We've got to take care of ourselves in order to be able to serve one another. And can you talk just briefly about the importance of that, and maybe talk about a few resources for people, books or podcasts or whatever, some things that people can lean into, because you've talked a lot about a lot of good things in this, and I mean, obviously they're good things. We're doing some great things, but talk a little bit about how to build capacity within yourself, and then maybe a few resources that people could that see this can go away and take a look at.
And it's a great point. One of the things I said last week, so we trained 29 peers from 7 departments, 6 police, 1 fire. And a key part of the message is that healthy people help people and hurt people hurt people. And, often our own struggle and suffering draws us into a desire to help other people. And there's something called, wounded healers. And that's the idea that, we've been affected in our own lives and we want to help heal others, using our own experience and strength and hope as a mechanism to do that. And that instinct is very sound and it's very human. And when we first started hosting programs at our facility from September of 2013 until May, until our planning retreat with Warrior Path, one of the core things we saw was a lot of people interested in helping others who weren't that well. And the idea being they were trying to help people get to a place that they hadn't been to on their own. And I don't know how you lead people to a place you haven't been to. It just seems improbable, especially when people like me don't have a sense of direction. And so being able to have the capacity to, and on that point, I was talking to Rich Tedeschi last night. Ken and I had a phone call with him late last night, the guy who founded PTG. And I was saying to Rich that, one of the things we were talking about in this training was that when people are going through stuff, you shouldn't use platitudes. And it's like, well, what's a platitude? Well, a platitude is, there's a reason for everything, or, God has a plan that you don't understand. These sort of throwaway lines that we say that are, or like, for example, my grandmother dies at 103. Oh, she lived a long life. It's like, yeah, but my grandmother still died, right? Like that is not solace for me. It doesn't feel nice. It feels like, oh, it's her time to go. It's like, I mean, that was not where I was at that moment. And
Right.
And I think people want clear guidelines. They want to know, like, if this happens, then I do this. If this happens, then I do that. And people don't work like that. It's one of the challenges with a lot of the manualized treatments is people aren't machines. It's not a decision tree YouTube video. This is really about being connected to yourself so that you can do one thing above all, which is really meaningfully sit with somebody else and be able to listen to them and connect with them. And to understand if you're moved or feel the desire or need to share something, then you do. Or if you just know that all they need you to do is listen and you don't have words, that you don't try to deal with uncomfortable silences, but you can accept them. And that's part of what that well-being allows you to do, is to be present for someone and deeply connect with them. And I think the other part about it is you have to be well enough, and this is the other kind of strange part that I kind of alluded to at the beginning, is I was reading some more Viktor Frankl, and he talks about, Frankl said in this recollections book that, he never remembered what he said to anybody because he was so intrigued in listening to what they said, but also talked about how he was changed in the process. And Rich said the same thing. And if we are so, I think, fixed or rigid because we're better than we were, but we're not necessarily solid, we can't create space for us to change and evolve because we are holding on tightly to this thing. We're like, okay, we're good now. We're good. This is what it is. I do this. This is all. And it's the whole idea of like, what got me here won't get me there. Is we have to continue to evolve and grow. And one of the things I did, like towards the end of this year, because, the other part for me about not being as active in the Warrior Path group and on Saturday mornings and stuff is, in part, I'm trying to also create some space in my life where I have some time to reflect and to read on a purposeful basis. If I'm traveling all the time and I come home, it's like just trying to have a little bit of, and balance isn't the right word, but just reallocate and redistribute my own time and way of thinking. And so I went through that process, which I do every year at Christmas time, is to reflect on, okay, for the next year, what do I need to change, right? You and I had conversations, right? And I had conversations with Ken to talk about, as a leader, as a person, as a friend, like, what are the things I want to work on? And then what do I need to adapt and change? And that's part of where the growth path is never ending, because we're continuing to evolve and change and try different things and test different things. For a number of years, I had lifted weights with Dusty. Then I stopped for a few years. Now we're back at it 3-4 days a week. And that's something that I missed in my life, and the physical strength element, but also just the time to connect with and bond with someone that I care about. So I think that's the piece of continuing to evolve and enhance our capabilities, because those are the things that allow us to show up for other people in the best way possible. And that means our motivation is pure. We're there to support them. We're not there to get something from them, even though, side note, you will get something because serving other people does make you feel good. But that's not your driving force. You don't need them to say thank you. You don't need them to validate you. And you've really had the chance to make sense of your own experiences. And I think that's like the whole expert guide idea, is like, when you look at the 5 components of what it means to be of mission and service in post-traumatic growth terms, it's like, serving others without needing anything in return, having the ability to make sense of your own journey and trauma and struggle, not feeling guilty for the ways in which you've grown, and the people who haven't been able to grow with you, whether that means they're just on earth and not able, or willing, or they're no longer with us. Right? It means accepting a new identity as somebody who's been through the journey of PTG and has value to bring to the world, and it's being willing to bring that value by sharing it with other people in different ways. And so that's what this journey is about, that enables us to be able to be a guide for other people. And, I think, each of us has to find what resonates for us. Because I laugh and I kind of think about, like, you have Oprah, who's like super nice on one end. You have like Goggins or Jordan Peterson on the other, who want to yell at you and, scream at you. And then I'm like, who's in the, and Jocko's kind of over here too. I'm like, well, who's in the middle? But the point is, some people love David Goggins yelling at them, MFing them to, work out. That's inspiring. Some people love Super Soul Sunday, right? And, and I think Ken and I probably, and Greg, we fall somewhere in the middle to like lean to the, the direct kind of spirit, but not the sort of mean-spirited spirit, is you have to find what works for you. Like for me, I enjoy obviously Frankel. I mean, I'm reading the book The Choice again by Edith Eger, Eger, which is, I mean, that book is definitely in the top 5. I just listened to The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers again. And so for me, I'm in like an interesting place where I decided I wanted to focus this year on rereading books. I'll still read some new ones, but my bigger focus was on rereading things than it was on trying to find new things to read and just going back and seeing, because one of the ways that you can gauge your own growth and your own evolution is by the ways in which you connect to content. And so when you're going through different things, different pieces of these books may resonate differently, whether it's for someone else in your life or yourself. And so I think that's a key part of it as we go through life, is to figure that stuff out. And I think, I think it's Mind Valley. I've watched a few of those talks on forgiveness. There's just such an abundance of, I've looked at some relationship stuff and attachment style stuff. There's some lady named Thais, I think it's Gibson, Thais, has interesting videos about attachment styles. I guess I'm probably a dabbler and then a rereader is what I've found to be really useful for me. And I do think certain things show up on the regular, and not to take, because I do like Goggins, but Goggins' book, You Can't Hurt Me, it's a great book, right? The audiobook is interesting. He reads, he doesn't read it. He actually kind of commentates at the end of each chapter. So finding what resonates with you and then being loyal to it and sticking with it. And remembering, I mean, yesterday I woke up and I was kind of making some coffee and listening to a podcast. It kind of had a spiritual bent to it. And it was just really interesting to start my day with a really carefully curated thing. But the biggest message I would give you is stand gate at the guard of your own mind. That's the bottom line. Stand guard at the gate of your own mind. Is think about what you're taking in. Are you watching crap? Are you on Facebook with a bunch of Facebook warriors? Are you listening to death metal, or what are you imbibing? Not just in your mouth, but in your mind, that is shaping your perspective. Right. And that's why I'm reading Edith Eger's book again, because I just several people in my life randomly found it, even though I recommended it to them, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's the other piece. And so I'm rereading it again because it's just such a beautiful piece. So that's what I would say is some of the old tried and trues remain tried and true.
And then kind of what you said reminds me of curiosity. If you're not sure what your lane is, be curious, dabble, test things out, watch a few videos, take some of these names and look them up on the old Google machine and be curious about what's out there, because you may be surprised. I know when I started reading, I reread Awareness by Anthony DeMello first of this year. And it was I remember as I got into it, I was like, man, this is not my style. And then I'm in a different place than when I first read it, and it resonates differently. And I think that's the other thing I would say outside of curiosity is as you read these books, as you listen to podcasts, as you watch TED Talks or whatever it might be, take notes. Because when I look at the books that I've read, and I read with a pen, I read and I take notes, and it's interesting to read not only the material again, not the book again, but also the notes that I took and what I underlined the first time I read it, what resonated with me the first time I read it, and compare it to what resonates with me now. And in between those two moments of resonation, there's a lesson. And that's the cool thing about going back and reading some of these things. It's also you're the fifth person in a week that's talked about The Choice. So now I feel like I got to go reread it myself again.
And two other comments. Tammy reminded us on the Bouldercrest site, we do have book recommendations that are ones that are near and dear. I think I put Siddhartha on there, which is an amazing kind of fictional story of Buddha. It's just amazing stuff. And then the other is, it's not all freaking, work. There's a show on Stars called Men in Kilts, which is, I've never seen the show. I've got it downloaded on my phone. I may watch some of it on the way to Arizona. It is called Outlander. But two guys from the show basically go around Scotland. One's about kind of whiskey and scotch. One's about the games they play, the music, the food. Anyway, I highly recommend that as well. I find it very intriguing. I know Ken and Julia thoroughly enjoyed it, and they lived in Scotland. So I would also recommend, it doesn't always have to be, deep philosophical things. And one other thing that I do is a guilty pleasure. I have enjoyed a lot, especially as a kid who grew up watching The Karate Kid many times. Cobra Kai is solid watching. So So just so you don't, no one
It
thinks
is.
that it's all work and no play makes Josh a dull boy. There's entertainment in the mix too.
It's about harmony, right? Balance kind of lends you to believe you got to give something up to get something. When you create harmony in your life, you get to have all of it in just the right
It's
amount.
about the Miyagi Dojo, man.
That's it, baby.
Mr. Miyagi.
Well, brother,
baby.
I appreciate you. If you're watching this and you've got questions or thoughts or you want to put in the comment section, things that you do, books that resonate with you, or podcasts or YouTube videos, any of that kind of stuff, TED Talks, please feel free, because anybody that comes after this that may not be watching it now can benefit from those same things. And if you got questions, we always go back and we look at these things when we're done. So if you've got questions, put them in there, and we will make sure to answer them. My brother from another mother, I appreciate you. Go finish packing.
Thank you. I will.
Your next adventure.
Bon voyage. It was great to see everybody again.
All right, guy. We'll see you.
All right. Thanks, Coach.